And then we had one of the worst segments on WWE television all year. A championship belt swap. How exciting. Just saying that out loud gets me so excited I can't hardly stand it. With Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. Becky, earlier in the show, teased wanting to become Becky Two Belts again. So I thought maybe they had some kind of big swerve planned here for this segment. We had one swerve earlier in the show making his debut. I thought we were getting maybe another swerve here, but that was giving them a little too much credit creatively. Once she was out there, though, I guess Becky must have forgotten everything that she had said because she didn't seem too concerned about becoming Becky Two Belts. Sonya Deville was in the ring with both women, and they literally just handed the titles over to each other. Well, I mean, to be more accurate, neither woman wanted to give up her belt. Becky went to go grab the Raw Women's title out of Charlotte's hand, and Charlotte instead dropped it on the ground. And then Becky threw her title at Charlotte. Great way to treat your titles, by the way. Let's just throw them away like pieces of garbage. I'm surprised they didn't stomp on them too, or maybe take a dump on them while they were at it. They did more to devalue their two women's championships in this one segment than anything else they have done all year long. Charlotte challenged Becky to a winner-take-all match right then and there since she wants to be Becky Two Belts so badly. That brought out Sasha Banks. Becky said, "I'll see one of you at Survivor Series," and she left. And the great heel that she is, she got chants of Becky from the crowd. Sasha and Charlotte went at it for a little bit. Sasha hit a Meteora off the ring apron to the floor to end the segment. This was fucking horrendous. They did the exact thing that I said I did not want them to do, and now you see why. No one came out of this looking great. No one came out of this looking any better than they did going into it. I mean, other than maybe Sasha looked great, I guess, in this segment, because she was the last one standing. We still don't know what this means for the lineage of the titles. I assume Charlotte is now a 13-time women's champion. I believe it counted as a new reign for the New Day the last time they did this with them, the belt swap stuff. So it's just another way to pad her bloated title resume and get her that much closer to number 17. These two look like a couple of spoiled brats out there. That's how they came off. That's how their characters came off here in this segment. And yes, they're supposed to be heels. Your women's champions out there looking like a couple of spoiled brats, throwing their belts around and having a temper tantrum. And it was not meant to go down exactly the way that it did. This, according to an initial report that we got from PW Insider. So let's take it back first to Friday night. After Rampage went off the air, which was taped on Wednesday, Andrade had the best match of his AEW run so far in a loss to Pac. Just a fucking great match. After which, he tweeted, "F you WWE," with a bunch of exclamation points. No context given. Now, I thought, because I was streaming at the time, and I'm being told, oh, Andrade just tweeted, and then I found out what he tweeted. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is his way of expressing himself, that WWE never allowed him to go out on the main roster and have the kind of match that we saw him have on Rampage. Because it was the best Andrade match since his NXT Championship defense at TakeOver Philadelphia against Johnny Gargano. I wouldn't say it was better than that, but that was as good of an Andrade match as I have seen since that TakeOver match. And that's going back a few years. So I thought, okay, maybe that's what it's about, because we didn't have any context to any of this. I mean, it just came off as sour grapes. Here's a former WWE guy not willing to let it go. You just had this great match. What the fuck are you going on Twitter for and bashing them? Focus on the fact that you just had this great match. Of course, I was not aware of any of the backstage stuff that was going on at that time and all the reports that would come out later on. But initially, that's what I just sort of assumed that this was about. Then WrestleVotes tweeted that there was more to the story. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, Mike Johnson posted on PW Insider, and Sean Ross Sapp also confirmed, there was a confrontation after the show, a shouting match, when Smackdown went off the air in the back at the gorilla position between Charlotte and Becky. Charlotte reportedly voiced concerns to WWE management earlier in the day about the segment before the show even went on the air, and was very clear that she was worried it might make her look weak. She didn't want to be made to look weak, nor did she want her title reign to look weak. Despite those concerns, the segment went on as planned. No changes were made. So even Charlotte recognized how dumb this segment was. But of all the women on the roster to be concerned about being made to look weak, it would be Charlotte Flair, the most protected woman on the entire roster. The woman who was going to end up with more title reigns than they had minutes of actual wrestling on this show on Friday. Charlotte is worried that she is going to look weak. Now, during the segment, they had an awkward exchange where Charlotte jerked her title away from Becky when Becky tried to grab it away from her, and in doing so, Charlotte dropped it on the ground. That was not supposed to happen. And then Becky threw her belt at Charlotte, which was apparently planned. Once Flair got to the back, there was a confrontation between the two over Charlotte allegedly disrespecting Becky by trying to make her look bad. That's what one source told Mike Johnson. There were loud words exchanged between the two of them. It never got physical. They didn't start pulling hair. They weren't rolling around on the ground. They weren't trying to put their finishing moves on each other. Fightful said that Charlotte was asked to leave the venue before Becky's dark match was over to avoid any further confrontation. She was then escorted out of the building by a WWE official, which I'm guessing is what led to that tweet from Andrade. His fiancée was escorted out of the building. She was escorted off the premises. And then came the tweet from him saying, F you, WWE. I find all of this behind-the-scenes drama far more interesting than anything they have done on television with any of these women. Now, according to Alex McCarthy of TalkSport, the friendship between Charlotte and Becky has been strained ever since Becky called Charlotte plastic during a promo on TV a couple of years ago. And things have apparently been tense between the two of them ever since. I mean, Charlotte today looks unrecognizable from the Charlotte of just a few years ago. Now, to each their own, it's her body, she can do what she wants, but I guess she is very sensitive to people using that word. She recently revealed also to Renee Young on her podcast that she and Becky are not as close as they used to be. So we already knew that not all was rosy. Not that they're enemies, but we already knew that things were not as they used to be. From her own mouth, between Charlotte and Becky. McCarthy also reported that Charlotte lobbied to lose her title clean to Bianca Belair on Raw last Monday. The two of them had a great match on Raw. I didn't get a chance to talk about Raw because what's the point? You know, it was a go-home show to a pay-per-view that I've already talked about. But I did want to mention that. That match with Charlotte and Bianca at the end of Raw Monday night was excellent, with a horrible DQ finish. And Charlotte is said to be, again, this is according to McCarthy, Charlotte is said to be a big fan of Bianca's and thought the finish of that match killed what could have been a big win for her. And that was the point that I was going to make to bring it back to how all of this could have been solved. And by the way, if that's true, hat tip to Charlotte for wanting to do the right thing. It does have to be mentioned, though, in the interest of fairness here, that Alex was the person who Charlotte reached out to a while back to clarify Andrade's pregnancy comments when the rumors were flying around about why she missed this year's WrestleMania. She went to Alex. So if she's a source of his, this could very well be coming from Charlotte herself. This could be coming from Charlotte's camp directly. Paints her in a very rosy light, doesn't it, right? Her lobbying against the belt swap segment, her lobbying to put over Bianca for the belt and wanting to do the right thing last Monday. I'm just saying, we can't discount that as a possibility. Wade Keller on the Pro Wrestling Torch site got his own report up yesterday that the women's locker room in WWE is largely on Becky's side, with one wrestler saying that Charlotte has been increasingly difficult to work with. There was another wrestler who said that nobody wants to work with her. You know, I mean, look, after her program with Rhea Ripley, can you blame them? Look how that turned out. To bring it back to the whole Charlotte-Bianca thing from Monday night, absolutely the right thing to do would have been to have Bianca Belair pin Charlotte to win the Raw Women's Championship last Monday. And if it is true that Charlotte pitched that very idea and was rejected, this ain't the first time that WWE has made a dumb decision not changing their women's title. Becky Lynch herself admitted in an interview the same thing happened to her last year when she just assumed going into WrestleMania 36, before the pandemic hit, she just assumed that she was going to lose her Raw Women's title to Shayna Baszler. Shayna the Vampire, who had just been called up. Remember that first appearance on Raw where she bit Becky on the neck and she's bleeding all over the place? They were building to Becky and Shayna, who had a dominant run on NXT as the NXT Women's Champion. And Becky just assumed, as a lot of fans probably did, that Shayna's going to win the championship at WrestleMania, and they're going to establish her as the new top heel on that brand in the women's division. And then she found out that that was not the plan. And Becky claims that she actually pitched the idea herself that she should lose to Shayna. And she got turned down. She got rejected. So instead, we ended up with a forgettable match between them, and Becky ended up giving the belt up anyway a month later when she found out she was pregnant. And Shayna went on to spend the next half a year tagging with Nia Jax. You talk about wasting 6 months of your career. Or more. It felt like a year. She was tagging with Nia Jax for far too long. But this whole situation could have been avoided. This terrible segment on Smackdown and all the drama that followed could have been avoided by not doing a title swap in the first place. Can you imagine Roman Reigns doing a title swap? You can't picture it, can you? You know why? Because he would never allow it to happen. He would laugh it off. Imagine having Stone Cold and The Rock swap the WWF and the WCW belts if they did a brand split during the invasion. It's too ridiculous to even conceive of such a thing. Now, they wouldn't have to do a belt swap because those belts had neutral names. It's not like even if they had two brands, it was, as long as it wasn't the Raw title and the Smackdown title, then it doesn't matter. That's part of the problem here. But if you can't visualize it for any of those guys, why is it acceptable to have your two top women's champions come out and swap belts like they're fucking Yu-Gi-Oh cards? The solution to this mess would have been to have Bianca win the Raw Women's title on Monday from Charlotte, and then at Crown Jewel have Sasha Banks win the triple threat to keep the SmackDown title on SmackDown. And then, at Survivor Series, we get the proper singles match between Sasha and Bianca that we never got to see at SummerSlam. Raw versus SmackDown. Problem solved. But no. They make a mess, and they try to lick it up with their tongues, instead of using the fucking paper towels that are sitting right over there on the kitchen counter. They're right there. All you gotta do is reach over and grab them. Here's an even better idea. Going forward, so we can avoid this in the future. You don't even need to unify the titles. I don't even think you need to do that. I would much rather see them unify the tag team titles rather than unify these two. You don't even need to unify the two women's titles. Either give the belts new names that don't identify a specific brand, like the WWE and Universal titles, they already do it, or make it so that your champions are not eligible to be drafted. Give the champions draft protection. They earn draft protection by being a champion on their respective brand. A lot of the problems that WWE ends up with are self-inflicted. This is just another example of that.